What's up, you guys? My name is Aubrey and this is my channel, and today I want to talk about the hearing that was just held in Congress. The Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell testified in front of Congress and the House Committee of Financial Services. The hearing was pretty all-encompassing and it covered a lot of different points, and there was a lot of stuff that was just pure fluff of the hearing as well. So what I want to do in this video is I want to talk about some of the key points that I took away from the hearing. That way you guys don't have to watch the entire thing. So let's get started. Now, I do want to reiterate that this channel isn't about analyzing the economy, analyzing what government officials, and analyzing the market and just economic indicators in great and accurate detail. That is not my strong suit. And so if you're looking for somebody who's really going to give you a deep dive analysis of what's going on in the economy, I am unfortunately not your person for that. Instead, what I want to do is provide you guys kind of with an overarching theme of what is being discussed. That way you don't have to waste your time watching hours of news coverage or reading dozens, if not hundreds of articles. Instead, you can watch my videos and get caught up to speed in a very easy to understand and summarized way. So I understand that with this video, there may be things that I leave out and I may oversimplify some concepts, but this is done completely intentionally as a way to make my videos easier to understand and, quite frankly, more enjoyable, because the fact is, talking about bond yields in great detail is somewhat boring. So with that, let's dig into the hearing that Jerome Powell had in Congress this morning and over the last couple of days. So let's first talk about who Jerome Powell is and why this hearing is significant. So Jerome Powell is the chair of the Federal Reserve, meaning that he is the public face of the Federal Reserve. And for those of you who don't know what the Federal Reserve is, or you don't know what they do, basically what the Federal Reserve does is their job is to promote a strong economy. And they do this through three main goals. Number one is they want to oversee the nation's monetary policy. Number two is to maintain effective and efficient payment systems. And number three is to oversee banking operations. So those are kind of the three overreaching functions of the Federal Reserve, but they do way more than that, and they have a lot of say and a lot of power when it comes to the US economy. But the thing that's important to remember about the Federal Reserve is that when it comes to passing laws that have to do with economic policy, that is not necessarily the job of the Federal Reserve. And that is where we come into the lawmakers, like our Congress members, our senators, and our president, and that is their job. So the Federal Reserve promotes a strong economy, but they do not pass laws in order to create that strong economy, if that makes sense. Now, one of the big topics of this hearing was interest rates, and will the Federal Reserve raise interest rates? Now, this is something that was of concern to investors. So basically how the interest rate process works is that whenever an economy is doing extremely well, interest rates will typically go up. Whenever the economy is doing poorly, interest rates will go down. Ever since the pandemic hit, we have been at all-time low interest rates. Interest rates are very close to 0%. And this is a way for the government and the Federal Reserve to promote spending. It's a way to get people to spend their money on investments in the stock market and purchasing items rather than socking their money away into a high interest savings account. So this is one of the tactics that the government uses in order to stimulate the economy, to lower interest rates. That way people are kind of encouraged to spend their money. Now, the idea of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates is something that has spooked investors over the last few days. If you've been paying attention to the stock market, the last couple of days have been pretty brutal in the market as a whole. And part of that crash is because of the fears that the Federal Reserve would increase interest rates. Now, one of the reasons why investors and just people in general were worried about interest rates and are concerned about interest rates is because of the bond yield. Now, historically speaking, bond yields have been a pretty good indicator to predict where interest rates could be going in the future. And in general, bond yields are oftentimes used as an indicator for a number of different economic metrics. And as we see here today, bond yields have been increasing. For example, the 10-year Treasury yield is at 1.4%, which is the highest it's been since February of 2020. So people are using the fact that bond yields are increasing as evidence that the interest rates may be increased as well in the near future. Now, Jerome Powell did seem to put these concerns to rest, saying that interest rates will stay at an all-time low, at least for the foreseeable future. And this is the same sentiments that Janet has expressed in past interviews and past hearings as well. The fact is, the U.S. economy is far from recovered, and we are far from where we need to be. And because of that, interest rates need to stay low. He did express some concern with unemployment, saying that unemployment is still very far from where it needs to be. In January, the US unemployment was 6.3%, but there has been concerns that this isn't an accurate number and that the number is quite a bit higher than that. The other thing about unemployment is the fact that unemployment is not affecting everybody equally. There are people in certain industries and certain sectors of the job market that are significantly more impacted than others. In addition to just job markets and sectors being affected disproportionately from one another, which is to be expected, minority groups and just groups of people in general are also being affected disproportionately as well. For example, in the month of December of 2020, 156,000 jobs were lost for that month. All of those jobs belong to women, whereas on the flip side, men actually gained 16,000 jobs in the month of December. So there is this disproportionate nature of the job market and who is remaining unemployed and who is going back to work. And there are a number of factors that come into play when we're talking about unemployment as to why certain groups of people are being affected more than others. For example, Jerome Powell did talk about some of these factors, including childcare, including school closures, including just industries changing because of the times and because of the pandemic. And that brings us to a question that Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley asked, which I thought was a really interesting question. And that was the question of, will the economy and will the job market rebound as quickly as it fell? So basically her question was, these people who lost their job because of the pandemic, they lost their job very abruptly. It was like the pandemic started and then within a month, a lot of people lost their jobs. Will the job market recover just as quickly once the pandemic is under control? And Jerome Powell did say that he does feel confidently that it will recover quickly, but he does not feel confidently in providing an accurate kind of representation of what that recovery will look like. He did say that there are a number of different industries and sectors of the job market that once the economy opens to 100%, once the world reopens, that these industries will just take off and the demand will go back to where it needs to be. For example, the travel and entertainment industry are two perfect examples of this. Once the economy opens up, once the world opens back up, people will begin to travel again, and as a result, people in these industries will be needed and jobs will open back up once again. But on the flip side of that coin, there are the industries and the sectors that will be able to make do without the jobs that they let go back in March of last year. There are a lot of industries, a lot of companies that have been able to adapt in a more cost-effective way because of the pandemic. And as a result, there are jobs that maybe existed a year ago that no longer exist. And there's simply no longer a need for those types of jobs and for those types of employees. And that was a concern that Jerome Powell had stated during his hearing. And he did make the interesting note that this change was inevitable. It just was expedited because of the pandemic. And I think that he's 100% right. And we will see those industries that will just take off once the economy opens back up. But there will be a lot of industries and a lot of jobs that have been changed forever because of the ability to either just erase the job as a whole, because of the ability to work from home, because of the ability to use technology to our advantage in order to cut down on labor costs. And this is something that will have a huge impact for specific jobs and specific sectors of the economy. Now, aside from the job market, unemployment, and interest rates, Jerome Powell did also touch on real estate and specifically residential real estate costs. This is something that has just blown my mind throughout this entire pandemic, especially being somebody that has been wanting to invest in real estate but have been wanting to wait for the right time. The fact is, the US housing market, and especially where I am in Texas, has been just going up like crazy over the last few years. And if you would have told me last year, will I think the housing market will continue to be strong throughout the pandemic, I would have said absolutely not. The housing market will crash. It's just a matter of when. And I would have predicted that it would have crashed last year, probably in the summer or in the fall, but it never happened. And the market is still strong as ever. And this was addressed during the hearing, and Jerome Powell was asked about his thoughts on the housing market and if things would continue the way that they've been going. And his response was kind of spot on with what I was predicting, but we're just waiting for it to happen. Basically, what he said was that whenever the pandemic happened and people started having to go into lockdown, into quarantine, the housing market was for a short time suppressed and people were not able to buy houses. They were not able to look at houses. And it took a period of time for the housing market and for the kind of real estate market to adjust to the new times. And once things adjusted and once houses were able to be sold again, once people were able to go to virtual showings, once the industry adjusted, there was an increased demand as a result. And the increased demand paired with the fact that interest rates are at an all-time low makes for a really good housing market. So he did say that this type of housing market, considering the circumstances of the environment, is not abnormal and that it actually is to be expected. But the fact is, this type of housing market cannot continue forever, and it's not a matter of if the housing market's going to fall, it's just a matter of when. And I think that we're all just kind of waiting to see when that happens, especially people who are wanting to invest in real estate with low interest rates. Now, the last thing that I would like to talk about of what Jerome Powell discussed during the hearing is just the economic recovery as a whole. There has been this debate over the last year of what will the economic recovery look like. There has been theories that it's going to be a V-like recovery where there is a sharp decline and then an equally as sharp increase. There has been theories that it will be a W-shaped recovery where we had the sharp decline, we have a little bit of recovery, a decline again, and then a sharp recovery again. There has been a whole lot of theories about what this recovery will look like. And Jerome Powell was optimistic that as long as we can get the pandemic under control, which means increasing testing, increasing vaccines, as long as we can get the economy opened, we should see an extremely strong recovery to the United States economy. And he had cited that the number of 6% economic growth is not out of the question, as long as we can get these things in line and as long as we can get these things that need to be accomplished in a timely manner. Ultimately, though, you guys, the hearing was very interesting. There were a lot of questions that were asked that Jerome Powell said he didn't feel comfortable answering because of the fact his role in government is not to create financial laws. So there was a lot of questions and a lot of time that was wasted on those sorts of questions that he would not answer. But overall, I think we got some really good insight on just the economic recovery, interest rates, and where we currently stand as of today in February of 2021. But with that being said, you guys, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have anything to add, make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.